The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the good kind, the wrong kind. The kind of silence that happens when something mechanical has stopped that should never stop. I stood on the back porch of the farmhouse at 5:42 in the morning, coffee mug warm against my palm, and listened. No hiss. No drip. No faint gurgle of sap moving through the main line. Just cold March air and the distant caw of a crow. I set the mug down on the railing and walked toward the sugar bush. My boots crunched over frozen mud, and the air smelled like wet bark and wood smoke from the sugar house chimney. The main line should have been pulling sap from 240 taps spread across 12 acres of mature sugar maples. My grandfather planted most of those trees in 1947, the year he came home from the war and decided he wanted to make something sweet out of something hard. He built the sugar house with his own hands. He taught my mother how to grade syrup by color and density. She taught me. And now, at 34 years old, I was running the farm alone because my mother had passed 3 winters ago and my grandfather had been gone for 12. The farm was my living. It was also the only place on earth where I still felt like I belonged to a family. I reached the first lateral line and stopped walking. The blue tubing was cut. Clean cut. Not chewed by squirrels, not cracked by ice. Sliced. And it wasn't just one line. I followed the main line north, and every 20 feet I found another cut, another dangling end, another dry spout. My heart was beating in my ears. I kept walking until I reached the property line, where my land met the edge of the Maple Hills subdivision. That's when I saw the buckets. Shiny new galvanized buckets, the kind you buy at a farm supply store for $40 a piece. They were hanging from my trees, my taps, my spiles. But the buckets weren't mine. Each one had a white vinyl sticker slapped across the front. The sticker had a logo, a little green tree inside a circle, with the words Maple Hills HOA Community Syrup Project printed underneath. I stood there for a long time, long enough for my coffee to go cold back on the porch railing, long enough for the sun to climb over the ridgeline and turn the frost into steam. Then I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. Every cut line, every bucket, every sticker, every tree. I took 47 photographs before I said a single word. Then I called my brother. His name is Daniel. He's 2 years older than me, and he handles the business side of the farm. Contracts, invoices, permits, taxes. He's the reason the farm survived after Mom died. He's also the reason we have an exclusive sap rights contract with every landowner within a 2-mile radius who doesn't want to tap their own trees, including the Maple Hills subdivision. Daniel answered on the second ring. "You're up early. Someone cut my lines." Silence. Then how bad? Bad. 240 taps, maybe more. They rerouted the sap into HOA buckets. HOA buckets, with a logo. "Send me the pictures." I sent them while we were still on the phone. I heard him breathing. I heard him click through the images. Then I heard him say something I had never heard him say before. They didn't. They did. That sap is under contract. Our contract. The subdivision signed it 6 years ago. Every tree on the common land, every tree on the private lots that opted in, we own the tap rights. Exclusive. They can't touch a single tree without our written permission. They didn't ask. No, they didn't. I looked at the nearest bucket. Sap was dripping into it. Clear, slightly sweet-smelling, moving drop by drop from my tree into their bucket. "What do you want me to do?" I asked. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Document everything. Don't touch anything. Don't confront anyone. I'm driving up tonight. That's it. That's it for now. Let them fill their buckets. Let them boil it down. Let them bottle it. Let them sell it. The more they take, the more they owe us." I hung up and walked back to the house. The coffee was cold. I poured it out and made a fresh pot. Then I sat at the kitchen table and started a log. Date, time, temperature, number of cut lines, number of HOA buckets, photographs taken. I wrote everything down in a black notebook that had belonged to my grandfather. The cover was worn soft. The pages smelled like old paper and wood smoke. On the first page, in his handwriting, it said, "Sap season 1948, first boil, grade A light amber, 12 gallons. I turned to a fresh page and wrote, "Sap season 2024, sabotage, evidence log." The next morning, the HOA president showed up. Her name was Patricia Calloway. I knew her by reputation. She had been president of the Maple Hills HOA for 7 years. She drove a white Lexus SUV. She carried a clipboard. She wore a quilted vest and expensive boots, and a smile that looked like it had been practiced in a mirror. She knocked on my front door at 8:15 in the morning. I opened it. She was standing on my porch like she owned it. Behind her, in the driveway, two men in matching polo shirts were unloading more galvanized buckets from the back of a pickup truck. "Good morning," she said. "I'm Patricia Calloway, president of the Maple Hills Homeowners Association. I wanted to introduce myself and let you know about a wonderful community initiative we're launching this weekend." I didn't say anything. She didn't seem to notice. "We're hosting the first annual Maple Hills Community Maple Festival," she said. "It's going to be wonderful. We've tapped the trees along the subdivision border, and we're going to boil the sap right there in the common area. We'll have jars of fresh syrup for sale, pancake breakfast, live music, the whole thing. All proceeds go to the HOA Beautification Fund." She said it like she was announcing a charity gala, like she expected me to applaud. I looked past her at the men with the buckets. They were walking toward my tree line. "Those are my trees," I said. Her smile flickered, just for a second. Then it came back, brighter than before. "Oh, I think there's been a misunderstanding. The trees along the border are on HOA common land. We had our grounds committee verify the property lines." "No," I said. "You didn't." The smile stayed, but her eyes changed. They got harder, more focused. "I'm sorry. I don't think I caught your name. My name is Eli Carver. My family has owned this farm since 1947. Those trees are on my land. The taps in those trees are my taps. The sap lines you cut were my sap lines. And the sap you're collecting belongs to me." She blinked, then she laughed. Not a real laugh. A polished, dismissive laugh that was meant to make me feel small. "Mr. Carver, I appreciate your concern, but the HOA has already consulted with our attorney. The trees along the border are on common land. The sap is a community resource. We're well within our rights. Show me the survey." "Excuse me?" "Show me the survey that says those trees are on HOA land." She tapped her clipboard with one manicured finger. "I don't have it with me, but I assure you, it's been reviewed." "Then you won't mind if I have my survey reviewed too." Her smile tightened. "Mr. Carver, I came here as a courtesy. The festival is happening. The syrup is being produced. If you have a concern, you can submit it in writing to the HOA board. We meet on the second Tuesday of every month." She turned and walked back to her Lexus. The men with the buckets followed her. I watched them drive away. Then I walked back to the sugar bush and took more pictures. The buckets were multiplying. There were at least 30 of them now, hanging from my trees like shiny metal parasites. I checked the cuts in my lines. Someone had done a neat job. Professional, almost. The cuts were clean and angled, the kind of cut you'd make if you wanted to splice in a new section of tubing. Except instead of splicing, they had inserted a diverter, a small plastic Y-joint that redirected the sap flow from my main line into a secondary tube that ran downhill toward the subdivision. I followed the secondary tube. It snaked through the underbrush for about 200 feet, then emerged in a clearing on the other side of the stone wall that marked my property line. In the clearing, someone had set up a collection station, a 55-gallon food-grade barrel with a spigot at the bottom. The barrel was already a quarter full. Next to the barrel was a folding table with a stack of HOA flyers. The flyer said, "Maple Hills Community Maple Festival, Saturday, March 16th. Pancakes, music, and fresh local syrup. $15 per jar. All proceeds support the HOA Beautification Fund." I took a picture of the flyer. I took a picture of the barrel. I took a picture of the diverter. Then I walked back to my house and called Daniel. "They're selling it," I said. $15 a jar. Festival on Saturday. How much sap have they taken? Hard to say. Maybe 50 gallons so far. Maybe more? 50 gallons of sap makes about 1 gallon of syrup. Maybe a little more. So they've got enough for maybe 12 or 15 jars right now. But the season's just starting. If they keep collecting for another 2 weeks, they could take hundreds of gallons of sap. Thousands of dollars of syrup. What do? We wait. Let them boil it. Let them bottle it. Let them sell it. The more they sell, the bigger the damages. And I found something. What? The contract. The sap rights contract the HOA signed in 2018. It's ironclad. Exclusive tap rights. No harvesting without written permission. Penalty clause for unauthorized collection. Triple damages for commercial sale. And here's the best part. Tell me, the contract was signed by the HOA president, Patricia Calloway. Her signature is on page 4. She signed away the HOA's right to touch a single tree, and then she cut our lines anyway. I sat down at the kitchen table. The black notebook was open in front of me. I picked up my pen and wrote, Patricia Calloway, signed contract 2018, cut lines 2024, festival scheduled March 16. Then I closed the notebook and waited. Daniel arrived that evening. He brought a file folder. Inside the folder was the original SAP rights contract, a copy of the recorded property survey from 2003, a copy of the deed, and a letter from our attorney confirming that the contract was valid and enforceable. We sat at the kitchen table and went through everything page by page. The survey was clear. The sugar bush was entirely on Carver land. The property line ran along the stone wall. Every tapped tree was on our side. The contract was equally clear. The HOA had granted us exclusive rights to tap any and all maple trees on HOA common land and on any private lot whose owner had opted into the program. In exchange, we paid the HOA an annual fee of $800 and provided 5 gallons of finished syrup to the HOA for community events. The contract had been renewed automatically every year. The HOA had cashed our check in January. They had accepted our syrup delivery in February. And now, in March, they had cut our lines and stolen our sap. She didn't read it, Daniel said. What? Patricia. She didn't read the contract. She probably forgot it existed, or she never knew about it in the first place. The contract was signed 6 years ago. She's been president for 7. She signed it, but she didn't remember it, and when someone on her board suggested tapping the trees, she didn't check. She just assumed. Assumed what? That the trees were HOA property, that the sap was free, that no one would stop her. He was right. I could see it now. The whole thing was built on arrogance and assumption. Patricia Calloway had looked at the trees, seen the taps, seen the tubing, and decided that none of it mattered. She had decided that her authority as HOA president was bigger than my property rights. She had decided that she could take what she wanted and call it a community project. And no one had told her no. Until now. The next 3 days were strange. I stayed away from the sugar bush. I let the HOA workers come and go. I watched from the farmhouse window as they emptied the collection barrel, hauled the sap to the common area, and boiled it down in a big stainless steel evaporator they had set up next to the subdivision playground. I could smell the steam from my porch, sweet and thick and familiar. It was the smell of my childhood, the smell of my grandfather's sugar house, the smell of my mother's kitchen, and now it was the smell of theft. On Friday, the day before the festival, I drove into town and stopped at the farm supply store. I bought a folding table, a tablecloth, and a small display stand. I also bought a box of clear plastic report covers. Back at the farmhouse, I made copies of the contract, the survey, the deed, and the photographs. I put each document in a report cover. I arranged them on the display stand. Then I called Daniel. I'm setting up a booth at the festival. He was quiet for a moment. Then he laughed. You're going to sell syrup next to their booth. No, I'm going to sell the truth. Saturday morning was cold and bright. The festival was set up in the subdivision common area. White tents, folding tables, a pancake griddle, a coffee station, a stage for the live music, and right in the center, the HOA syrup booth. Patricia Calloway was there, wearing a red apron with the HOA logo. She was arranging jars of syrup on a display table. The jars were beautiful, glass, 8 ounces, gold foil lids, handwritten labels that said Maple Hills Community Syrup, in looping cursive, $15 each. I parked my truck at the edge of the common area and unloaded my table. I set it up about 30 feet from the HOA booth. I spread the tablecloth, I arranged the report covers on the display stand. Then I sat down in a folding chair and waited. People started arriving around 9. Families with kids, retired couples, young professionals. They wandered from tent to tent, drinking coffee and eating pancakes, and admiring the syrup jars. A few of them stopped at my table. What's this? A woman asked, pointing at the report covers. Information, I said. About the syrup. She picked up a report cover and started reading. Her expression changed, slowly, from curiosity to confusion to something harder. Is this true? She asked. Every word. She put the report cover down and walked toward the HOA booth. I watched her talk to Patricia. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see Patricia's face. The smile, the headshake, the dismissive wave of her hand. The woman walked away. She didn't buy any syrup. More people came to my table. They read the documents. They asked questions. I answered calmly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse anyone. I just showed them the contract, the survey, the photographs of the cut lines, the photographs of the HOA buckets on my trees, the photographs of the diverter, the photographs of the collection barrel, the photographs of the flyer advertising syrup for sale. By 10:30, a small crowd had gathered around my table. By 11, the crowd was bigger. By 11:15, Patricia Calloway noticed. She walked over, still wearing her red apron, still carrying her clipboard. Her smile was gone. "What do you think you're doing?" she said. "Educating the community. You need to leave. This is an HOA event. You're not a member. I'm not on HOA property. This table is on the public right-of-way." I checked. Her face flushed. "You're harassing our vendors." "I'm not talking to your vendors. I'm talking to your customers." A man in the crowd spoke up. He was holding one of the report covers. "Is this true? Did you cut his lines?" Patricia turned to face him. "Of course not. The trees are on HOA common land. We had every right to tap them. The survey says they're on his land," the man said. "The survey is outdated. We have a more recent one." "Can we see it?" I asked. She stared at me. "I don't have it with me." "That's convenient." The crowd was murmuring now. People were pulling out their phones, taking pictures of the documents, taking pictures of Patricia, taking pictures of the syrup jars. A woman in a green coat stepped forward. I recognized her. Her name was Margaret Chen. She was the treasurer of the HOA board. I had met her once, at a community meeting 3 years ago. She was quiet, careful, and she didn't like Patricia. "Patricia," Margaret said, "what is he talking about?" "Nothing. He's just a disgruntled neighbor. He has a contract with the HOA signed by you." Patricia's face went still. "What?" Margaret held up her phone. She had taken a picture of the contract. "This is your signature. Page 4. Exclusive SAP rights. No harvesting without written permission. Triple damages for commercial sale." Patricia grabbed the phone. She stared at the screen. Her face went from red to white. This is old. It's expired." "It's not expired," I said. "It renews automatically. The HOA cashed our check in January. You accepted our syrup delivery in February. The contract is valid through 2025. The crowd was silent now. Even the pancake griddle had stopped sizzling. Patricia looked at Margaret. Margaret looked at Patricia. Then Margaret said, "How much syrup have we sold?" One of the volunteers at the HOA booth answered. She was a teenager, maybe 16, wearing an HOA t-shirt. "About 60 jars," she said. "Maybe more." 60 jars at $15 each, I said. "That's $900, plus the sap you haven't boiled yet, plus the damage to my lines, plus the cost of the taps you pulled, plus the value of the sap you diverted. Under the contract, triple damages for commercial sale puts the total somewhere around." I looked at Daniel. He was standing at the edge of the crowd, holding his own coffee. $15,000 to $20,000, he said, depending on the final tally. Patricia's clipboard slipped out of her hand and hit the ground. The metal clip made a sharp cracking sound against the pavement. No one picked it up. The festival unraveled slowly. Not all at once, not with shouting or drama, just a quiet, steady deflation. People put the syrup jars back on the table. They asked for refunds. The pancake griddle went cold. The live music stopped. The volunteers started folding chairs and taking down tents. Patricia stood in the middle of it all, not moving, not speaking. Her red apron looked like a costume now, a costume for a role she wasn't going to play anymore. Margaret Chen walked over to my table. She picked up one of the report covers and read through it carefully. Then she looked at me. "I didn't know," she said, "about the contract, about the trees." Patricia told the board the trees were on common land. She said she had checked the survey. She lied. Yes, she lied. Margaret looked at the HOA booth. The jars were still on the table. The labels were still curling at the edges. "What do you want?" she asked. "I want the sap back. I want the syrup back. I want my lines repaired. And I want Patricia Calloway to resign." Margaret nodded slowly. "I'll call an emergency board meeting. Tomorrow." "Good." She walked away. I stayed at my table until the last tent came down. Then I packed up my report covers, folded my table, and drove back to the farmhouse. Daniel was already there, sitting on the porch with a fresh pot of coffee. "That went well," he said. "It's not over." "No, but it's close." The emergency board meeting happened the next day. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. Margaret Chen called me afterward and told me what happened. Patricia had tried to defend herself. She had claimed the contract was invalid. She had claimed the survey was wrong. She had claimed she was acting in the best interests of the community. But the documents didn't lie. The contract was valid. The survey was accurate. The photographs were undeniable. And the vendor invoice was the final nail. Margaret had found it in the HOA files. An invoice from a local tree service company, dated 2 weeks before the festival. The invoice was for sapline modification and bucket installation. The service had been hired by Patricia Calloway. She had paid them with HOA funds. She had told them the trees were on HOA property. She had lied to them too. The board voted unanimously to remove Patricia as president. They voted to refund all the festival money. They voted to pay for the repair of my sap lines. They voted to return all the unsold syrup to me. And they voted to refer the matter to the HOA's insurance company for the damages. The insurance company called me 3 days later. They asked for copies of the contract, the survey, and the photographs. I sent them everything. A week after that, I received a check for $18,400. The letter said it was for property damage, lost sap value, and triple damages for unauthorized commercial sale. I deposited the check. Then I walked out to the sugar bush. The HOA buckets were gone. The diverter was gone. The collection barrel was gone. My lines were still cut, but a crew was coming the next day to repair them. I stood under the biggest maple, the one my grandfather had tapped first, back in 1948. The bark was rough under my hand. The buds were starting to swell. The season was almost over, but there was still time. I walked back to the sugar house and fired up the evaporator. I had sap stored in the bulk tank, not much, maybe 40 gallons. Enough for a gallon of syrup, maybe a little more. I boiled it down slow. I watched the steam rise. I smelled the sweetness. I thought about my grandfather, my mother, the farm, the trees, the contract, the photographs, the black notebook, the festival, the crowd, the clipboard hitting the pavement, the red apron, the silence after the music stopped. When the syrup was finished, I filtered it and bottled it. I didn't use fancy jars. I used plain glass bottles with plain labels. On each label, I wrote, Carver Farm Maple Syrup, established 1947. I put the bottles in a box and drove to the subdivision. I knocked on Margaret Chen's door. She answered with a cup of tea in her hand. I wanted to say thank you, I said, for doing the right thing. I handed her a bottle of syrup. She looked at the label. Then she looked at me. You didn't have to do this. I know. She smiled. It was a tired smile, but it was real. The board is going to be different now, she said. We're going to be more careful. More honest. Good. I drove home. The sun was setting behind the sugar bush. The trees were dark against the orange sky. The sap lines were still broken, but they would be fixed. The season was almost over, but there would be another one next year. I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee. The steam rose into the cold air. The farm was quiet. The right kind of quiet. The kind of quiet that means everything is working the way it should. I opened the black notebook. I turned to the page where I had written sabotage, evidence log. Underneath, I wrote, resolved. Contract enforced. Damages paid, Patricia Calloway removed. Syrup returned, farm secure. Then I closed the notebook and watched the light fade. Some people think authority comes from being loud, from clipboards and logos and red aprons and festival flyers. But real authority is quieter than that. It's recorded at the county office. It's signed on page 4. It's kept in a folder on a kitchen table. It's backed up by photographs and surveys and contracts and the truth. A clipboard is not a deed. A logo is not a title. A festival is not a right. And silence is not surrender. It's preparation. The sap is still running. The trees are still standing. The farm is still mine. And next spring, when the buds swell and the lines start dripping, I'll be here, just like my grandfather was, just like my mother was, just like I always will be, making something sweet out of something hard.